Good morning, engineers and friends. Welcome to day one of the JIE's Development Forum series for 2025. I am Colin Porter, the president of the JIE, and I'm here to welcome you this morning to the first presentation in this year's Development Forum. It promises to be an exciting morning for you. We hope that our presenter and ourselves will be fully engaged. We hope to learn quite a bit as we move forward in the series. Now, just to give you a little bit of background as to the development series and what it's about. This is one of what is becoming one of JIE's, what shall I say, top tier knowledge sharing activities. It started out as a developers forum. Those of you who may have attended the past would be quite aware of the developers forum, which focused on issues affecting the development community, particularly infrastructural development. This year, however, we have decided to widen the scope of topics because we recognize that development takes place in multiple segments of our nation. Infrastructure still being the core. However, we note that issues pertaining to other aspects of engineering, the maintenance of public infrastructure, energy is always a big issue, which we will focus on today. Matters pertaining to processing, mining, and other aspects of development have all shown that they are worthy of discussion and of sharing. And so our forum here this morning will start off with discussion, let me call it a discussion on energy. And we will be looking in particular, I won't go too much into that. Our moderator for the day, engineer, Dr. Gary Jackson, will give some more details in the introduction to the topic later on. Now, for JIE, we also want to share with engineers some other what we would call perhaps soft topics. And we have been fortunate to have established a small partnership here with NCB Capital's Market, who will be doing a presentation this morning as well, talking about financial efficiency, maximizing your money for meaningful impact. And this will be from both a personal perspective for yourself, but also how you can maximize your financial capabilities for your businesses as well. What is development without proper financial management? And so we will be having a short presentation from NCB Capital Markets as well. And happy to say that they are also bringing a few little giveaways. So at the end of the session, there will be a couple of questions, and those of you, just to prove that you are paying attention to the presentations, will be fortunate enough to receive a small token from NCB Capital Markets. And so I want to welcome you to this morning's presentation. Some other ground rules will be laid out to you. I'll just give it the most basics, that we're encouraging you to use a chat feature to pose your questions. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentations. So please hold your questions that you may have to ensure that the presentations run smoothly and that we try to keep within the time frame as expected. So that's it from me. I want to encourage you. We will be here every Thursday for the month of March, starting at 10 a.m. each morning, each week. And please pay attention to our social media channels and our emails, where we will share details of upcoming sessions. If you have not received an email or seen anything from our social media and have received the link from a friend, please put your information in the chat as well, indicating that you would like to be added to our mailing list so that we can keep you in contact with all the development happenings, right? So at this point, we will, let me find out from my team from NCB if you are ready to proceed so that we can go into that. And after that presentation, we will introduce our moderator, Engineer Dr. Gary Jackson. NCB, is Daniel here?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm here. See me? I think
Okay,
Daniel
yes.
disabled incorrectly.
Okay, no problem, Daniel. Welcome very much. So let me just introduce you and welcome you to our first series in this year's Development Forum knowledge sharing event. And we have here with us Ms. Danielle Folks, who's a senior wealth advisor at MCB Capital Markets. And she is going to be sharing with us, as I mentioned earlier, a presentation on financial efficiency. Maximize your money for meaningful impact. And that's something I know I'm looking forward to. I want to find out how I can maximize my money and make meaningful impact. And I'm sure everyone is looking forward to hearing your presentation, Daniel. So over to you.
All right, thank you very much for that, Colin. Just give me a minute while the presentation goes on display. All right, good morning. And thank you very much for inviting us. We're here and we're ready to talk about how we can help you to maximize your money for meaningful impact, right? So I'm going to encourage everybody to just actively participate in this session. Once you have any questions, please go ahead and raise those. Do not hesitate to talk. This is a very interactive session, right? So first and foremost, I want to point out to you that we here at NCB, we're all about our clients and we want to ensure that we understand your financial needs and we are doing our best to ensure that those goals and needs are met, right? So engineers design efficient systems and optimize resources. The same principle applies to building wealth, efficiency, scalability, and resilience, right? At NCB, wealth creation is about structure, strategy, and sustainability. We follow the laws of wealth creation, aligning with your expertise in problem solving and innovation, right? So here at NCB, we have what we call our 5 laws of wealth creation, which we stick to consistently, right? And these laws are: 1, own a few high value or high quality businesses. 2, thoroughly understand these businesses. 3, ensure these businesses are domiciled in strong long-term growth industries. 4, use other people's money prudently. And 5, hold these businesses for the long run. So I think in essence, these 5 laws of wealth creation is telling you that you need to plan, predict, and persevere, right? So for this presentation, I want you to remember to plan, predict, and persevere. And we're going to start by talking about you. And we're going to put you first in the sense that we need you to understand the importance of paying yourself first. Systematic wealth building. Allocate resources before expenses. Prioritize investing in stocks and real estate. And the takeaway for you is to automate investment-like processes. And I want to take this opportunity to just introduce you now to what we call our recurring investment setup. So what it does is it allows you, based on your pay cycle or how frequently you would like to invest, you're able to set up a standing order system where we can pull from your salary account or whichever account you choose on a periodic basis and apply those funds to an investment of your choice, right? And you may say, but I don't have any investment yet, or I don't know what to invest in. And I'll say to you, now is the time for you to take out your phones. And I'm going to ask you to just quickly save our NCB phone number. It's a WhatsApp number. And this number will allow you to quickly help us to determine your risk tolerance. And what this will do, this will ask you a series of questions from which we'll be able to obtain your risk tolerance and also help you to plan your investments. So just give me a quick minute. Let me share the phone number with you. Right, so the number is 876-728-7075. And you need to just save it, go to WhatsApp and text My Wealth. And our AI Simone will respond to you and ask you a few questions about yourself. And then we'll be able to properly assess your risk and to guide you in terms of selecting your investment that best suits you. All right, so now you're going to make your money work for you. So one, you're investing efficiently, right? Don't let your salaries sit idly in a savings account or a checking account somewhere. We want you to invest strategically to generate passive income. 2, leverage principle. Amplify income over time, explore equities and bonds. 3, diversify your portfolio. Explore equities, bonds, and alternative assets. And we have a host of them here at NCB. We'll get the opportunity to go through them with you on an individual basis. So do not hesitate to reach out to us, right? Protecting your wealth. 1, risk assessment. So the WhatsApp number that was just shared with you is a part of how we go about assessing your risk individually, right? So when you assess your risk, finances need the same approach as projects. So when you do a project, you go and you do your risk assessment. It is the same when you're investing. 2, wealth safeguards. Protect your financial future. So remember, I talked about planning, predicting, planning, and persevering. That principle is coming alive again. So 1, you have to plan, you have to prepare, and you must predict, right? Number 3, insurance. Ensure you have insurance and a pension plan. So after you go about investing, you have to protect your investment. You have to protect those you love most and stand to benefit from you. So we have a host of insurance options as well, which you can use to protect your investment and your assets, right? And number 4, diversification. Diversify your investment portfolio. And what this means is that you won't put all your eggs in one basket. So you will look at the different investment options we have, and we will select the best set of assets for you. Let us build a legacy together. Long-term thinking. Great engineers design structures that outlast generations. And that's the same thing we want to do with your investment. We want you to create wealth for yourself and your generations to come. Estate planning. Wealth works the same way with estate planning. So with our estate planning, you want to ensure that whatever you're investing today, your loved ones will be able to benefit from it. So we are going to set you up in such a way that when you're no longer with us or you're no longer able to do what you can do now, you and your loved ones are well covered, right? Trust. Consider generational investments for your family, right? And this is very important. Engineer your financial freedom. Apply precision and long-term vision to finances. With NCB Wealth Solution, you're engineering financial freedom. Wealth creation isn't by chance, it's by choice. Let's build your financial blueprint today. So here are a few investment opportunities that you may see buzzing in social media and around you. Probably your peers are talking about it. So today we're going to just touch on these a little bit. And I think you would have heard the slang "on the road." And I must say, this is your opportunity to now jump on that bandwagon and own the road, right? So Trans Jamaica Highway have a offer for sale shares, right? And it is now available on our NCB Go IPO platform. You are now able to buy shares in Trans Jamaica, which is a stock that is already listed on our Jamaica Stock Exchange, and it is doing extremely well. It is poised for growth. It pays good dividends. It has continued strong financial performance, and now is the time for you to own it, right? So here are a few details about it. So the main issue, no, this is a different investment, sorry. Right, so let's look at some key details about this offer. So we have the shares available in both local and US dollar currency. The local currency, it is being sold at $3.60 per share, and you can buy a minimum of 1,000 units. So that should cost you about $3,600 plus a fee of $172, right? And then the offer opened on the 4th of March, and it is scheduled to close on the 18th of March, 2025. So now is your opportunity to give us a call, and you can reach me at 876-842-8088. Call us today. Do not let the opportunity miss you, right? Then our second opportunity for you is the NCB Financial Group bond. So we have a local currency bond that is available for you, right? And this will allow you to have fixed income coming into your portfolio. So the arranger's name is NCB Financial Group, as I just mentioned. It is only available through us at the moment. Again, it is on our NCB Go IPO platform. Use for proceeds is debt financing, the facility type. So we have two tranches. So we have tranche A and tranche B. They're both available in Jamaican dollars. Tranche A lasts for 2.5 years, and the interest rate is 10% per annum. And this interest is paid semi-annually. And then tranche B, available for 5 years, which can be a part of your medium to long-term investment pool, and you're getting a return of 10.5%. Again, this is paid semi-annually. So all interest on these assets are paid every 6 months, right? The opening date, February 26, 2025. The offer remains open until March 20, 2025. Please do not hesitate to join. Again, we try to ensure that whatever investments we recommend or offer to you is based on your investment style. So my question to you, what is your investment style? Are you conservative? Are you a moderate investor? Or are you an aggressive investor? Find out by just WhatsApping my wealth to our WhatsApp number. So there's a video going now. I'm not hearing any sound, but at the end here we have displayed. Could you just pull it back a little bit for me, Jody? Jody, can you run the video once again, please?
You won't hear the sound for the video. It was supposed to be just in the background. Do you want me to go over it again?
Please, thank you. Right, so this is our on the road video snippet, just showing you some details about the offer. It's open to all Jamaicans. It has good track record of performance. And this is the web page which you can place your offers or submit your application. So that's ncbgoipo.com. So it's www.goipo.com. All right, thank you. So now I'm gonna ensure that you get to ask all the questions you may have. So we're gonna just open the platform for your questions. And remember, investing starts with you. So you have to make the first step. We're here to help you, and this is your time, your opportunities right now. Any questions?
Let me ask again. Any questions for Daniel from anyone in the chat?
Any questions about our recurring investment options or from on the road? Any questions, any interests? So we want to hear from you and help you to take the next step for a stable financial future. So we have a link that Colin will be sharing with you. Please head over and do the survey. I'm seeing a hand.
Hi,
Hi.
good morning. So the Go IPO link, is it only for persons who have NCB accounts or can it be for anyone?
All right, so no, you don't have to have an NCB account to use the link. It is for anybody who already has a brokerage account that can facilitate the buying and selling of stocks. So if you have an account with another broker house, you can use your account details to make the application. Once you have an NCB capital markets account, you already have a JCSD number and a broker number, so you can proceed to do it. And if you want, you can actually open an account online. So say you have an NCB bank account, but not a brokerage account, you can actually go online on Go IPO platform and create an account. And if you need the help of an advisor, I am right here. Just give me a call. I'm going to repeat my number so everybody has it. It's 876-842-8088.
Thank you, Daniel.
All right, you're welcome.
There's a question in the Q&A section. For the recurring investment, can the standing order arrangement facilitate fractions of revenue versus a static amount?
All right, so for standing orders, it has to be a fixed amount that it holds. Our system is not able to pull varying amounts at different time. It must be a fixed amount currently. But if you do want to do varying amounts, you can reach out to me and I can support you with it. So for that person who is interested, I believe it's Alex. Alex, just go ahead and take my number and reach out to me. My number is 876-842-8088. And for the benefit of everybody, say, for example, you want to invest 20,000 per month, but 1 month you are able to do more than the 20. You still are able to do so, right? So there's no cap. You can always do more. Any other questions? All right, so if we don't have any other questions, that's it from me. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to partnering with you to meet your financial needs. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Daniel, for those and for questions. I know you have a few tokens for giveaway. So further questions, please post in our chat, and then if anything, we can give them away further in the session. Daniel, I don't know if you're able to stay with us until the end, that we can facilitate giving away some of these goodies. So I want to thank you very much again for that presentation. I want to implore everyone to visit the Go IPO website. And I hope you're taking a note of Danielle's number. You can give her a call for her to clarify or provide any further information on this particular IPO and the bond, or any other information you may want to ask her that could support the growth of your own business and your own wealth. So thank you very much again for that, Daniel. Further reminder, in the chat, we will be posting a survey that we are going to ask all participants to complete at the end of the presentation. So before you leave the chat, please ensure that you complete the survey for us. This information is important so we can better serve you going forward. So at this point, you would have heard enough of me, so I'm going to now hand you over to our moderator for this segment of the discussion, Engineer Dr. Gary Jackson. So Gary, over to you.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you very much. Good morning again, everyone. It's a pleasure being here. And thank you all for joining. This is a very important part of our energy transition, energy efficiency. We have seen where renewable energy, and particularly solar in Jamaica, is very sexy. But energy efficiency, because it's not so tangible and you can't see it, it doesn't get the attention it truly deserves, being the first fuel. So I want to give you some context as to why we are here today and what we want our invited guest, our presenter, very knowledgeable in this area, to share with us this particular area that I believe Jamaica should, and have attempted to in the past, should re-initiate. So commercial and industrial sector continue to grapple with energy cost. The energy cost seemingly the second highest operational cost in a business, next to staff cost. The interventions of these sectors varies from AC retrofits to dirty tides, from installing combined heat and power plants, combined cooling, heat and power plants, LED lighting retrofits, to name a few. However, the sustainability of this is not the best, and the initial capital outlay has compounded it with the O&M struggles that you are facing. And training is going to be a vital part of the energy transition, and it will need to play a critical role in the sustainability of these projects with the best-in-class installation and commissioning. Just to note, in 2017-2018, CARICOM Secretariat received funding to initiate what we call an integrated utility service model with 4 pilot countries. The intent with these 4 pilot countries, which was Guyana, Barbados, Belize, and Jamaica, was to set up what we call an integrated utility services, where the utilities would have come in behind the meter and do those retrofits with you, and you pay on savings. That's basically the rough and dirty version of it. Now, the offer wasn't taken up. It was a grant to kick them off. It wasn't taken up, in all the countries. Some were toying with it. One was doing it under regulation, one was doing it hybrid, one wanted to do it totally off regulation by setting up a company to do it. Jamaica didn't get to kickstart. One of the reasons for that is that they were changing CEOs like every 3 years. So another leadership comes, the vision looked like it changed. So that didn't happen. So ultimately, Jamaica should participate in this. And I think one of the things that Jamaica will need to consider is putting energy efficiency within the regulatory framework. That way, Esco markets, which our presenter will share with you, would evolve, and it would give it a push in our view, since we have had so many false starts in the past. So the areas of focus today is going to be the energy Esco model, which is energy service company model, using performance contracts, what it is, the benefits and disbenefits, if there are any, illustrate the stakeholder in a Esco model, who are they and how they benefit from this structure, the financing structure of Escos, and any case studies that our presenter can share with us. And one of the things that I want to leave with you when you go through his presentation is think about EE, energy efficiency, within the regulatory framework, meaning that just as how the regulator regulates electricity, you do the same with in a different style or different form, regulation on the demand side. And any recommendations you can consider in asking our presenter questions, in seeing how we can adopt Esco into our country in a more meaningful and decisive way, and sustainable way, of course. So now I want to introduce our presenter. Pierre Langlois has more than 35 years of experience in the clean energy sector, including the design, financing, implementation, and monitoring of the energy efficiency programs and projects worldwide. And just to note, Pierre and I have known each other for a number of years, and he has done quite a lot of work in the Caribbean and in Jamaica to support this energy transition that we are so desperately wanting going forward. Pierre is recognized as one of the leading international experts in the development and implementation of innovative financial mechanisms in energy efficiency, including the use of energy performance contracts in industrialized and developing countries. He also has extensive experience in the development of energy efficiency policies, demand management, and the development of innovative initiatives in the energy demand sector for Canada and international financial organizations and institutions. During his career, he has served on boards of numerous consulting firms, energy service companies, and super ESCs around the world and international organizations, including the Energy Efficiency Evaluation Organization and the Global ESC Esco Network, which is a United Nations initiative. One of the key things about the work that Pierre does is that he operates within the performance aspect of your project in terms of verifying and ensuring that the project is meeting expectations as it relates to the savings that you're accruing for that. So Pierre, over to you. And thank you so much for being a part of this program with us and being a part of the JIE family. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you for the associations to invite me for this presentation. So I'm very happy to be able to share with you some experiences related to energy performance contracting, ESCOs, and energy efficiency in general. Let me first say that I've been, as Gary said, quite involved in the Caribbean in the past, and Jamaica especially. I work with pretty much all the stakeholders in the market. And I wish I could be with you in person, as in Canada right now, where I'm sitting, Quebec City. We're kind of 0-degree raining and not so good temperatures. So I kind of envy you with your nice weather and nice environment. So I hope that this presentation will lead for me to go back again and have a chance to share with you experiences related to the energy efficiency market, and to be able to meet you in person. So. Hopefully, Gary, you can confirm that you see the slideshow.
Yes, so you need to get into full slide mode.
Here it is.
Yes, you're there.
Perfect. Good. So we'll spend about the next hour in presenting energy efficiency and the commercial industrial sector, especially the introduction of EPC model. So again, my name is Pierre Langlois. I'm the president of Econoler, an international consulting firm and a fund manager in energy efficiency. And as Gary said, I've been in that business all my life. I started working as an Esco in 1986. And since then, I've been working on that topic in Canada, well, in Quebec, where I live, in Canada, more generally as a country, and over 60 countries myself over the years, including many in the Caribbean. So this is my reference. And as far as energy efficiency, let's start with this very short definition, so we are all sure we talk about the same thing. So when I refer to energy efficiency, it's essentially a way to use less energy to perform the same task, so therefore eliminating waste. So when I'm going to talk about energy efficiency, I'm going to talk about that, but I'm also going to talk about more broadly demand side management activities. So demand side will be on the side of the consumer. So decentralized energy efficiency, like renewable energy like solar, can be part of energy efficiency, as it is essentially reduce the consumption at the meters level or at the consumer bill level. So that can be included. And when I will refer again to energy efficiency, that can include water, as it's also a natural resource, and the same concept will apply. So we're essentially in the concept of eliminating waste, trying to be more efficient, reducing the consumption of energy, water, natural resources, and other costs associated with it, and including the use of natural resources that are available in the renewable side, including solar, especially in the case of Jamaica. So as I said, let's say that. So why energy efficiency? Why are we talking about energy efficiency? Well, essentially for a lot of reasons, and it depends who you are. You're engineers, you are in the field of energy consumption somehow. Either you're at the government level, either you're at the industrial level, you're at the bank level, you are at the consumer level, you are equipment manufacturers, service providers, and whatever. Everything can be concerned by energy efficiency, but they may not look at it exactly the same way. So at the more macro level, at the side of the government, you talk about energy security. We've seen it in Europe recently with what happened in Ukraine. The fact that you're more efficient, you're less dependent on other countries for your supply of energy, and therefore your security is enhanced. We can think of it also as sustainability, which has been the main thematic, I think, that has been used in the last several years related to energy efficiency, because obviously reducing the consumption will enhance the reduction of carbon emissions. And in the world we live in, and with threats with climate change, energy efficiency is one of the main way to reduce this consumption and the impact on the environment. But we can also look at it as economic development. Well, energy efficiency is a way to securitize energy supply, is a way to securitize an energy needs, and it will be an investment that will create jobs, that will create needed capacity, and it will invite the economy to be a lot more efficient globally. So it's definitely how you look at it, either on the macro side, the micro side, or in the economic or environmental side. Energy efficiency is all positive for all of this. The local pollution and the cost-effective security is the topic that I will not talk too much about during this presentation, because we'll more focus on the concept of performance contracting. But keep in mind that the end result of all that, and the way to convince government, to convince financial institutions, to convince decision makers, investors, and whoever, are essentially all relying on all these thematics and not only on the business model itself. So the challenge before us, well, if you think about it, based on the International Energy Agency, in order to achieve the targets that the world gave itself to reduce the consumption worldwide, to reduce the carbon emissions, and to live in a more sustainable world where the temperature will not rise as much as it could based on no action, we will have to reduce the energy demand by a third, while we will increase the economy side by 150%. So that's pretty impressive goal. And that's aside everything related to the fact that we will use renewable energy on the supply side. So on top of all the changes, all the evolution on the supply side, we'll still need worldwide to work massively on energy efficiency if we want to meet that goal by 2040. And interestingly, out of that same study, or that same vision of the International Energy Agency, half of the reduction of consumption, of carbon emissions, will have to come from energy efficiency, more than all the renewable energy source on the supply side combined. So more than the hydro, the solar, the wind, the nuclear, or whatever that can be used for the supply side, energy efficiency will still contribute to more than half of everything that needs to be achieved by 2040 in order to achieve these goals. And that means the energy efficiency contribution will need to double its activities yearly by 2030 as base of today in order to meet these objectives. So everybody has to be concerned, and everybody has to be part of that solution, because it's massive work. So I'll talk about energy efficiency as the best thing. I'll talk about energy efficiency as being so positive for everyone, for countries, for individuals, for organization, for banks, for everyone. Well, if it's so good, why is it not happening? Why is it not there and it's not an active part of policies, an active part of the investment, an active part of the decision-making process, energy efficiency should be everywhere if it's so good. Well, first of all, it's not as visible. And as Gary said at the introduction, well, we see renewable energy. We don't see energy efficiency. So that's obviously one point. But there's other points, and we will refer to them as market barriers. So if it was so easy, and if it was so good, if it was so financially wonderful, everybody would do it. But they are not doing it for a lot of reasons. One being the fact that there's a lack of knowledge and expertise. I cannot do something that I don't know about, or I cannot do something that I've been made aware about, but I don't know how to do that. So for energy efficiency engineers, replacing lamps, installing heat recovery system, or installing PV system is rather simple. But for the common decision maker, it might be complex. It might be something they don't know, they're not aware of, and they need expertise. And the lack of knowledge and expertise is the first barrier that we meet. The second one, which is probably the most important one at some point, is the lack of time and priority. Well, everybody waking up in the morning doesn't have energy efficiency in its mind as its main target, except people like me who live out of it. But otherwise, most people do not think about it. And if they think about it and they say, well, it would like to be a priority, no one is sitting into their offices doing nothing and say, well, here it is, you have nothing to do, so let's work on energy efficiency. So there's a lack of time and priority. And that's very important to recognize because one of the tasks of performance contracting, one of the goals will be to change all that. The lack of capacity to take on risk. Well, people are risk averse. You know, what we're competing in the market, whatever the field of activities you're in, what we're the most confronted to is do nothing. The do nothing is the default solution, is the easy solution, is the solution that everybody will take, except if otherwise they decide to do something else. But otherwise, it's always going to do the do nothing. And one of the reasons of the do nothing being so strong is it appears to have no risk. There's no more risk, at least, than what you're doing today, because you do nothing more than what you're doing today. But actually, there's a huge risk of not doing anything. The risk of carbon emission taking on and having climate change a lot more impactful on everyone. The risk of cost increase of energy that will threaten the balance sheet of countries, will threaten the survival even of companies. There's risk of doing nothing, but the perception is always risk of doing nothing is less than doing something. So lack of capacity to take on risk is omnipresent. The lack of access to adapted financing, I'm going to talk a little bit more, but it's not a fact that there's no money out there. In most countries around the world, money is available for good projects. The fact is, for energy efficiency, these funds are not just adapted in the way they're provided to end users, to the one who needs it, governments, end users, private sector, public sector, residential sector. The fact is that this money is not available in the way that make it simple to access related to an energy efficiency project. And lack of capacity, well, you can have everything, but if you don't have the capacity to do it, you don't have the knowledge to do it, you don't have the expertise to do it, you don't have the willingness to do it, well, nothing will work. So all of these are market barriers. Let's come back to adapted financing a second, because performance contracting will look into it pretty deeply. Well, in all the financial market that exist, what you'll find is essentially that money is available through either loans or equity. Well, most of us, if we want to do something, we want to buy a car, we want to buy a house, we want to invest in our corporation, whatever, we will borrow money. And we'll borrow money, the lenders will very often look at us as an entity, as a borrower, and we have the financial capacity to actually borrow the money. And when they look at us, they'll look at our assets, they'll look at our debts, and they'll say, well, these financially viable or not. What we'll create with energy efficiency is not an added asset. Yes, we'll replace equipment, well, we'll have better things installed, but it will not necessarily create such an asset. It will create a future asset based on the future stream of revenues. And that's something that we call project finance. And project finance exists at the bank level on the lending and equity side, except that they do it for very large projects. So if you do a windmill or you do a hydro plant or you build a big industry, Then they will do project finance and they will take the risk of projects. But in energy efficiency, it's very, very rare because, first of all, the projects are too small, the technology is very diverse, and the banks just don't have the capacity to look at it and accept that the future asset you're creating, the future cash flow that will come out of savings, natural resources, and especially in our case, energy, um, as a value, and they will lend against that value. They will lend against your asset. And that's where in the decision-making process of anyone, you'll say, well, you have compromise to do. If you have a capacity to get financing, well, you'll get it for something you need at first, and energy efficiency may not appear to be um, the most important thing to do and often is discarded in the choices that are made. So that is why ESCOs, energy service companies, have been created. So let's define what an ESCO is. Well, an ESCO, first of all, as its name says, it's a service company. It's an energy service company. And it's essentially a company where its business model is to eliminate the barriers for the implemented energy efficiency projects. So that will relate to a lot of organization, consulting, construction company, and all that. But it has a very specific aspect to it, where its remuneration is tied one way or the other to the performance of the project implemented. So consulting engineer will be based on fees that is paid for producing something, drawing, specification, audits, whatever. A construction company will be paid for actually implementing something. An ESCO will be paid, and its remuneration will be tied one way or the other based on the result of what has been done. Not on the fact that he designed something, not on the fact that he implemented something, but by the fact that that something that's been done actually created a benefit, and that benefit is going to be the key to actual remuneration. So in the world today of energy efficiency, if you look at it bluntly, you have a consumer who may be interested to do an energy efficiency project. And if we reach that point, very good, he eliminated all of the barriers and he says, okay, I'm willing to do that. But then very often these projects are once of a lifetime or once per 10 years. You don't do an energy efficiency project all the time. So if you look at it in the consumer point of view, he will have to hire a professional consulting engineer, contractors to implement, buy equipment, work with the government on the legislations or the utilities for grants or the way the cost of energy is used to bill. He will have to work with the banks to borrow money and all that, and all that becomes quite complex. Everything is tied to another. So the ESCO look at it essentially to say, well, I will be the go-to organization where you don't have to care about all that. I'll care about all this myself, or partly at least, and I will eliminate all these barriers and essentially be remunerated if the action that is going to be taken is going to be that's going to have a benefit for the client. So that's where we see the ESCO as being an integrator. It will work on integration of everything that is needed. And out of that integration, it will mean that it will be able to do all the development phase of a project, identify energy conservation measures, energy efficiency measures, do the design, potentially structure the financing, and we'll see based on the model, some of it are included and some others they're not. They will procure the equipment, supervise the construction, commission the project, make sure capacity building is done for the maintenance and for the operation. We'll add a performance contracting part of that. Will provide a guarantee. You'll see in the models how it's all about. They will essentially make sure that operation and maintenance are optimized. Some ESCOs will offer that part, some ESCOs will not, and will essentially defer to the end user. And very importantly, we won't talk about it quite a lot today. So Gary, I'm going to be happy to come back at some point to talk about that very specific aspect of performance contracting, which is measurement and verification, M&V. So there cannot be performance contracting if there's not measurement and verification of success of energy saved, because everything based on performance contracting is based on the demonstration that savings have been generated, and you need very specific measurement and verification activities that are well known by now. And I'll just make a short reference to the organization I used to lead as a board member, as a chair. It's an NGO that's called Efficiency Value Organization. It's an international NGO, a nonprofit, essentially for the development of the best practice of measurement and verification. Everything is free on their website, protocol, example of plans, They offer training and so on. So you can refer to efficiency valuation organization, and you'll find quite a lot of information on MNV. And I'm going to be glad to talk about it later on in another presentation, as it's way too much for this hour that we have. So energy performance contracting. Essentially, we'll talk about three models: the guaranteed savings, the shared savings, and the guaranteed rebate, which is essentially called chauffage, a French term, which can apply to anything else, not necessarily heating. So we'll go rapidly to these three models. Well, the first one is essentially a contract where an Esco will provide to its client a guarantee that whatever that client will pay for will have a benefit, and that benefit will be guaranteed some way or others. And the ESCO will be remunerated based on that guarantee, meaning that if the savings that are expected are not as high as the expectation of the project, they will have to repay back the consumer for the difference in order for the return on investment of the consumer to be what it was promised to be. So we say essentially that when we start up at the current situation, we have a cost. We have energy consumption, we have O&M consumption cost, and all of that represent a cost for the consumer. Once a guaranteed saving scheme is put in place, essentially the energy and O&M costs will go down, freeing a capacity to pay by the end user. That end user will essentially use that capacity to reimburse all the charges related to the project. The ESCO cost, the financing cost, its own capital investment if it needs to have such capital investment, so equity. And at the end of the process, after the contract has been completed, the end user will have repaid all the cost, one way or the other, either to the savings that will be generated, or if the project fails to perform as expected, to a reimbursement of the ESCO. And at the end of that contract, the owner will benefit from that free space in its budget on the reduction of consumption, and benefit from all the other benefits of a project. Will be reduced maintenance, improved productivity, better comfort in households, or in well, not households, because performance contracting will be difficult, but whatsoever in the buildings that it's focused on. So there will be a full benefit afterwards, but during the project there will be the benefits. So the cost of energy will remain the same, or a little bit less if we want to structure the project as is. So we just use a part of the savings to reinvest. And over time, the contract will essentially generate the positive benefits to the clients. How is it structured? Well, essentially, there are two main contractual arrangements in a guaranteed savings. One is with the ESCO, which essentially is paid as a construction company, as an engineering company, as the work is progressing. And at the end, the ESCO is paid fully, or with a small amount being kept by the client to keep the ESCO honest, to essentially realize all the work. And there's another contractual agreement with a bank that will essentially loan the money to the client, or the client will invest by itself, but most often it will have a loan to the client, and the loan will come with a warranty that the client will have to repay back the institution, not based on the savings on that specific case, but based on installment that will have been pre-agreed. So for a period of 3, 5, 7 years. The reimbursement period, what will happen? Well, the savings will be used to, well, the ESCO will provide the guarantee if applicable. We hope not, and we hope that the project will overperform, but if needed, the ESCO will pitch in. But essentially, the savings will be used to reimburse the bank, the financial institution, and to pay for the measurement and verification that will come as a service, as a cost on an ongoing period, to actually make sure that those savings are there, in order to make sure that the ESCO will be kept on the leash, actually, to repay in case of defaults, if it was ever going to happen. In a guaranteed savings contract, the financing is organized essentially by the client, or could be organized by the ESCO, but it's always at the client level. The ESCO is not involved in these kind of things as far as financing. Like I said, they have contacts with banks, they have contacts with investors, they can do whatever, but the ESCO itself doesn't have a risk any risk related to the financing aspect. So they don't take the client risk, meaning that the risk of default of repayment, the risk of bankruptcy or whatever. They essentially have the commercial risk of, well, the technical risk of the project. So it's less risky for the Esco because they actually take the risk on what they're best at, which is the capacity to generate the savings. The contract period is very often fixed, coordinated with the debt service. So if you have a 5-year loan, then you have a 5-year guaranteed period. I know in countries like Jamaica, the capacity to borrow on the longer term is sometimes more difficult. The hurdle is very often very high, and therefore it limits the capacity to do a deep retrofit, because if you only have 2, 3, 4, 5 years, well, you essentially do less than if you have 15, 20 years as far as contracts, which is now the norms in many countries. The 10 to 15 years in Canada would be the norm. In Europe will be the norm as well, where there's a even more extensive type of these contracts, for example, in Europe, where you have 40 years contracts. Why such long periods? The 4 years will be more in the public sector than in the private sector, but why such long terms? It's essentially because if you want to do deep retrofits, bringing your building to net zero, limiting the cost of energy to a minimum, well, obviously the investment are going to be huge, and the payback period is going to be not as good as if you limit yourself to 1 or 2 years. Well, you'll maybe reduce 5-10% of your consumption if you're lucky, but it's going to be a very limited scale as far as the project itself. If we go to a shared saving contract, well, shared saving contract is essentially the first one that was developed. And Econoler, my company, has been the first one to develop it in Canada and almost in the world in 1981. So early in the 1980s. So it essentially evolved from Canada, the US, Europe, and during the 1980s, that model was the one that was the most known. So essentially, we have exactly the same type of approach. So cost of energy at the beginning and O&M, and then you have a reduction, but it's a type of contract that will change. Well, essentially now the Esco is not going to be paid as a contractor, as an engineer, based on the evolution of the project implementation. It's going to be paid out of the savings. So that's why we have a shared savings contract. It means that as the savings will be generated over time, the Esco will be paid. It's really a service contract where the service is associated with savings. So the service is to generate savings. How you generate it is immaterial at some point. It becomes material within the contract, but conceptually, it's essentially, I give you a service, and on an annual basis, I'm going to be repaid out of the benefit of that service, which is defined by the capacity to generate savings and the amount of those savings. That implies that the Esco will have to structure the financing on its side, either through a loan, as it's demonstrated in that slide, or through a third-party investor. Will it essentially invest in a project, not necessarily in the Esco, but in a project, and that the project will be considered as a project financing approach by the institution, and that project will essentially take the risk of the client itself, defaults, non-payment, bankruptcy, as well as the risk of performance. No performance, no payment. So the model is quite different because, as you see, the Esco will provide to the debt payment or the structure replacing the Esco, but let's say in a shared saving contract, typically could be the Esco. The Esco will repay the financial institution and will make sure that the savings are generated, and based on those savings, the client will pay the Esco. The Esco will perform the measurement and verification, or a third party will do that. He will actually make sure the corrective actions are made to generate as much saving as possible and be paid out of that savings on a monthly trimester basis, and make sure that the savings are enough to repay the financial institution that they borrowed the money to, or will have to pay the difference and will limit its profit up to the point where it can even have a non-profitable project at all. So it's definitely a more risky model for Escos, because then you have the commercial risk of the client. And as far as contractual period, well, you have about everything. I've seen in Africa that model being used with 6 months. Why 6 months? Because the savings, the little savings that are so obvious, turn off a ventilation system, reorganize the supply cost of energy through adjustments to the bill, replacing some very, very simple equipment that will actually have a payback of 3 months. And the shared saving has been applied where the capital cost was very small, the benefits were very high, and the ESCO was paying itself by a share of the savings, which could be 100% or could be a percentage of the savings generated. But I've seen as well, like I said, in Europe, 40 years contract, where the savings are used in part, let's say 80% of the savings to repay the whole investment. And that contract period will be very, very long to ensure that we're able to replace the insulation of the buildings, replacing the walls, the windows, everything that is architectural costs a lot, but it's the only way to decarbonize a building in countries where it's cold. So that's the only way to do that. So the contractual period is quite different. A fast out approach, which would mean that the contractual period will end as soon as the ESCO is paid back. That model has been developed in the early 80s by Econoler. That was the model we're using. So everything is open book. All costs are transparent. And as soon as we're repaid, the savings are essentially kept by the client, and there's no share of the savings anymore. And the client benefit faster of the benefits of the project if it overperforms. So we call that a fast out contract. A chauffage contract is something that's been developed more in Europe more than 100 years ago. Essentially, the concept is that you have a utility providing energy. When I mean a utility, it can be electrical, but in the case of Europe, it was quite a lot of heating utility, a centralized heating system that was providing heating to a building. And someone came in and said, well, I can provide you the heating at a lower cost. So I will essentially install a boiler within your facility and I will sell you the heat as a lower cost. So the guaranteed rebate was essentially if you paid 100 costs per unit of energy, I'll guarantee you that you'll pay 90. And out of the 90 that the ESCO will receive, I will essentially pay all the investment needed and still make a benefit because I'm more efficient than the utility was selling you energy. So in many countries, doing that on the electrical side is prohibited because there's a monopoly on the side of the utility to sell electricity. But in different type of environment where there's not such a limitation on energy supply, then there's model where people will install PV, for example, and say, well, the cost of my PV will be less than the cost of the electricity company and I will be able to supply you at a lesser cost energy. And in that case, we can call it an ESCO because the remuneration of the company who provide that service is essentially tied to the savings that are generated because the client will only get into such project if there's such benefits for them. The most obvious benefit will be the cost reduction. The other one would be the capacity to provide electricity on a more sustainable basis when there's cuts within a system, then maybe the benefit is not so financial as far as energy reduction, but more as liability as far as capacity to produce on a long-term basis. So in a guaranteed rebate, a chauffage model, you'll see that the financing is essentially based on the capacity to produce energy. You have a long-term agreement, very often quite long. The ESCO essentially structure everything, including all the financing for the project, and it's paid not on the savings per se, but it's paid on the energy that is being sold to the end user. So like I said, the chauffage is a French term. It means heating. And the way to sell the energy will essentially be per kilowatt hour sold or per value of thermal energy that has been sold. You associated a cost to it, and then you sell it like a utility. And the ESCO, obviously, in that case, controls and maintains all the facility. In the other two cases, it's optional. Some ESCOs will only work if they're able to control and maintain the equipment. Some ESCOs will agree not to do that as long as the client agrees to maintain and to operate the facilities at a level of efficiency that is pre-agreed contractually. All of these contracts means that they are sophisticated as far as business agreement. They are unfortunately not so easy to develop. There are a lot of risk mitigation that are included into it, including, for example, the operation of the facility, the way the end user will take care of the equipment if the maintenance is on their side, the guarantees over time that are linked to equipment, and all the risk associated with the performance of these things. So contracts are very often from 40 pages to 200 pages. They're a little bit complex. They have to be adapted to the reality in the country. And sometimes that reality, that legal framework is limiting on how a performance contract can be used. Sometimes it's not, but sometimes it is. So it has to be carefully crafted, carefully designed to make sure it adapts to that reality of the legal framework of the country, to make sure it adapts to the cultural approach of the market, so how the market reacts to such innovative business approaches, and how globally we can structure things. So the guaranteed savings will be the easiest in a startup market for Escos because it does not involve all these financing aspects and the risk associated with it. On the other end, it may be less attractive to clients because they perceive that they still have the risk on the financing on their side, and it may limit their interest in a guaranteed savings models. The shared saving model is the one that usually is the one that seems most obvious to crack down the code and implement these projects in a country where the business model is not known. So you don't have to pay anything. I'll come in, I'll do everything. You'll pay me if their savings seems too good to be true. On the other end, it's a lot more risky for Escos. It's more difficult to develop the financing. And in some environment, the legal environment, the risk involved related to non-payment becomes unbearable. If to go to the legal court will take 10 years to resolve, then it's not a viable market. So it has to be developed in market. It seems easier and more attractive to develop a shared savings in countries where performance contracting does not exist. But very often the guaranteed savings is the way to go because it's a step-by-step approach and you start offering part of the whole thing, which may be enough in some cases to actually make the decision maker to go forward because it's still an offer that it's very attractive compared to the typical way of doing things. Let me talk at the end about super Escos a little bit, and I want to make sure I'm not going over time. So a super Esco has a very bad name for what I'm going to present. Super doesn't mean better, it doesn't mean Superman of Escos, it doesn't mean the best thing compared to Escos, it just means the different ways to apply the whole thing. So what is a super Esco? A super Esco can be described as an entity set up by a public or private investor. So I'll refer to cases that are public, I'll refer to cases that are private sector, but it can be any one of those that offer full EPC services. So Super Esco is an Esco, and it works with EPC. One of the models that I presented, in this case, you'll see that there's the two models used. That it includes adapted financing. That's essentially the core business of a Super Esco, is to take care of that. And essentially subcontract all project implementation to private sector Escos that guarantee the expected savings to be realized. So that's where you work with both models, and you essentially work with an added value approach to enhance the Escos in the market. A super Esco is not replacing any actors in the market. It's essentially coming as an added value to that market to enable projects to go forward that would not have gone forward otherwise, where Escos very often do not want to get involved in the financing. They don't have the technical, they don't have the financial capacity, they don't have the willingness, they don't have the capacity to bear that risk, but they still have the technical capacity to identify, design, and implement projects. So you'll have many energy super Escos in the market, not that many, and I've seen in the chat that there's some that have been referred to, but you'll see that super Escos are not that many at this point. There are some, essentially it was really started in the Middle East, so you'll have Etihad Esco in Dubai, you will have TAQA Energy Services in Abu Dhabi. One of the most successful one is in Saudi Arabia with Tarsheed. Interesting concept that's been developed. There's one in the Caribbean, interestingly, that I had the chance to work with, and we're still working with, which is in Trinidad and Tobago with the natural gas utility. There's some in Canada that I will present, and I will refer them as a reference. So I'll present some slide about that. And there's some in Europe. We actually operate ourselves one in France, as well as the one in Canada. So there's a few. One that has been talked about a little bit is ESL in India, but ESL was started conceptual as a super ESCO, is not anymore because they don't work with ESCO. They don't subcontract ESCOs on one hand, and their business model is not to be paid based on the savings per se, but it's a different business model that they developed. They were able to move quite a lot of money. It's an impressive model, but it's different than what I'm referring to now. It is not really associated with a super ESCO. But there's many. There's one in the Philippines, and in China, which is the biggest market as far as ESCOs in the world. There's more than 5,000 ESCOs, the best as we can know. There's some that are working with guaranteed savings, are working with shared savings, but the super ESCO model is there somehow. So I had the chance in the 2000 to work extensively in China for many years. That market is not comparable to anyone. You cannot really apply it to any other country in the world based on the size and the culture and the legal system that they have over there. So it's not the same. So coming back to super ESCOs. The first concept of a super ESCO is essentially to unlock the market potential. It's actually there to reinforce capacity in existing private ESCOs because it will provide a market for them. It will develop a pipeline for them. A super ESCO must possess all the necessary capacities to adapt EPC concept and produce a complete set of documents like an ESCO. So it has to be the capacity to enter into a contractual relationship with clients, work on the shared savings, and you'll see that. It must have a strong capacity to identify business opportunities in the market. Well, if you're on the public sector, well, your market is the public facilities mainly. So you have the capacity to essentially tap on that market. It's not as easy as it seems because very often countries are not structured in the way that it's easy to create something like that. For example, if the Ministry of Energy was creating a super ESCO to the benefit of the market, it's not automatic that it will be able to contract directly with the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of Hospitals, Ministry of Health to actually implement the project on their behalf. And you would still have the Ministry of Finance involved in it if the payments of bills are paid by finance, like I think is the case of in Jamaica. So it might be quite complex as well on the public sector to tap on markets. There's a lot of barriers as well related to the legal framework. Can municipalities, for example, enter into a long-term contract with an EPC on an EPC model, even with the public sector? I had the privilege to work in Jamaica on the street lighting program, where with the Inter-American Development Bank, we developed some kind of an ESCO program to actually implement that with the utility of Jamaica. I was very, very pleased when I went at some point and see that all the project has been implemented. If I remember well, 150,000 lamps have been changed out of that program. And there was a link to it about performance contracting, as there were a link to the business development with municipalities and the Ministry of Local Affairs. It's not exactly that name, but I forgot what it was, local communities, I think. But it was very challenging to look at all the complexities of the legal framework, even in the public sector. In the private sector is very, very often a lot more simpler because very often legal framework will not prevent two corporations to enter into a contract the way they want. And there's no limitation related to the length or to the way the payment can be done. But there might be issues related to taxes, income tax, taxes, added value services tax. So that has to be applied, well, looked at and applied very carefully. But if you look at super ESCOs, they essentially should not be perceived as a competitor of ESCO. So when we created the super ESCOs in Canada, in France, in countries where they were ESCOs compared to when we were involved in the Emirates where there were no ESCOs when we started, we were perceived a little bit as a competitor. But now on, we have more than 15 ESCOs working with us in Canada. They're looking for us to generate more business to them. They're coming to us when they meet a client that is unwilling to implement the project because of lack of long-term risk-taking or financing. So it's really a facilitator capacity to enhance these kind of projects. So the development strategy would be simple. Sell projects, you identify opportunities like an ESCO, you structure them like an ESCOs, but you essentially go back to the selection of an ESCO either sole source if you're private sector, either tendering if you're public sector. You can do public sector the way probably through the procurement approach, but in the private sector you can structure it the way you want. Very often we work sole source with Escos that come to us with projects, and you essentially have something that is very, very beneficial in a market development. You standardize contract, you standardize financing, you standardize agreement deals, you standardize agreement with manufacturers. You make life of everyone easier on the financing side, on the Esco side, on the client side. Is everything is standardized. You develop a market with something that is understandable by everyone, and they can compare each other. The complexity with Escos is they all have their models. They're all tweak it the way they want. Sometimes they're very, very innovative, but it's difficult to compare because for a client to compare two Esco offers might be two different models, shared saving, guaranteed savings, and even in one of those models, you will have variations that are quite big, and it creates confusion at some point. The Super Esco has that ability to monopolize some part of the market, essentially make it streamline and accelerate the deployment of project while reducing the cost of financing. So let me talk a little bit as a presentation on that about the case of Sofiac. Sofiac is our Super Esco in Canada. And I just want to give you a brief overview of what it is so you understand the model. So we'll take the opportunity to look at the models, guaranteed savings, shared savings. We'll look at the way we work with Escos and at the way it was structured. So essentially, as a structuring, it's a $200 million facility. The way it was structured against an investment company, if you want, and it was developed on a financing basis. The financing by one pension fund, Fondation, one lending company, Desjardins, which is one of the biggest banks in the northeast of Canada. You have two debt partner, people who have associated debt with the whole facility. So it's 40 million equity, $160 million debt. It was done by Canadian Infrastructure Bank and with Fiera Capital, which is a debt facility, and with the financial support of the government of Quebec of Canada. So they supported us in the creation because structuring something like that with 200 million costs quite a lot of money. The due diligence of the investors and all that. So the government of Quebec and government of Canada pitched in a little bit to make sure we're able to design the whole thing. And that started in 2020, so about 5 years ago. Econoler, the company, is currently the manager of Sofiac. So they're essentially the corporation that is managing the whole thing. So how does it work? And you'll see the models. So you see Sofiac as a corporation having financing capacity of $200 million. They essentially go to market and they say, well, we will invest in projects and we'll essentially implement project on the behalf of consumer, and we'll do that under a shared saving agreement. So the client doesn't have anything to pay upfront, will essentially benefit from the project, and will only have as an obligation to repay part of the savings that can be 80 to 100%. And let me say a word about why 80 to 100%. Well, the more we get as a shared saving part, 100%, the bigger the project can be. And the benefits associated with these projects are not only savings, but there's also improvement of the infrastructure of the facility. They are, and they're structured around fiscal benefits related to amortizations and all that. So sometimes there's an added and decarbonization, let me say. So a lot of our clients want to decarbonize as much as possible. So they use 100% of the capacity generated by the savings to essentially implement the project. The 80% on the other end will be where the client wants to have short-term benefits. And on the private sector side, people are looking for short-term benefits, added cash flow year one, and improvement of their financial balance sheet day one. So with 80%, they generate savings and they have all the other improvements at a lesser size, yes, but they still have all the benefits and they generate positive cash flow. On the other end of the equation, on the left side, you have the technical delivery partners. So you have the Escos. So we go back to the Esco market and we say, well, for that specific consumer, let me see what you have as the best option, the best proposal. What is the best proposal? The best proposal is the one that will generate the most savings out of the business model that we have, which is a 15-year agreement based on a shared savings with some limited intermediation cost to put the whole thing together, and the return on investment to our investors. Based on those parameters, the ESCO will have to come with the highest savings at a cost, and the highest savings for us because the best project. Well, we can qualify the highest savings by the highest energy savings. We can qualify it by the highest cost savings, and we can qualify it as well by the highest decarbonization level. So depending on the clients, these parameters can be tweaked, and then we get the best offer. So what the ESCO does, he essentially identify the projects, go in the building, identify the best project, design it, implement it, and actually guarantee to us through a guaranteed saving schemes the savings. In that sense, the Super ESCO is ensured that if the savings are not generated at the level that is expected to repay the investors, actually the money needed to repay those investors will come from the ESCO. It means that the ESCO has to be very solid on the technical basis as well on the financial basis, because if there's a default, they have to have the capacity to repay. So that limits the ESCO numbers to the one that have the technical capacity to do so, as well as the financial capacity to provide the guarantees. Those guarantees can be corporate. So if you have Johnson Control, Honeywell, Siemens, to mention 3 very big corporations internationally that we work with, well, they work hundreds of billions of dollars on the market. Corporate guarantee is worth quite a lot. But if you have a small ESCO, local, well, maybe the way to get that guarantee will be through a bond, through an insurance. There's not that many insurances that exist to do so, but technically it could be. So we have some entity, some mechanism to guarantee the savings. And then I will spend a little time on the independent party at the right side, the bottom side on the right side. We sell energy efficiency. We sell savings. But savings are not metered the same way as energy is metered. So if you have a bill from GPS in Jamaica, well, you pay your bill. You can always say, well, I'm not sure and there's a problem and all that. But normally you receive the bill. The bill is based on energy that's been metered by an officially recognized meters, and you pay the bill. What we sell is exactly the same thing as GPS, except instead of selling megawatts, we sell negawatts. And these negawatts cannot be measured by a meter. A meter cannot measure something that does not exist. So essentially what we do is we apply the measurement and verification best practices that I referred to at the beginning. And we use IPMVP, the International Performance Measurement and Verification Protocol that is promoted by EVO. And we use that as the mechanism that we define the savings. That mechanism, which is transferred into a plan, so the protocol becomes a plan in a project, will essentially be the way that the savings are going to be measured. They are agreed by the customer. They are agreed by the ESCO, because both will rely on that measurement either to pay the savings or to pay the guarantee. But what we included in that portion is essentially a third-party evaluator. So we say, well, who will do this measurement and verification? Who will quantify and guarantee that those savings are real? Well, technically, nothing in the ESCO world prevents anyone to do so. So naturally, in a lot of markets, the ESCO does so. Why? Because the ESCO has more capacity. It has more technical knowledge. So the ESCO does so and say, well, I guarantee the savings. I will demonstrate to you. The burden is on myself to demonstrate to you that the savings are there. Find a way to do that. If there's a problem, if there's a challenge, then we can recognize that the consumer has less capacity in front of the ESCO to challenge it because it's not at the same level of knowledge. In practice, the customer can hire someone, a third-party expert, to essentially exchange with the ESCO and come to an agreement when there's a problem that what is actually the savings. Well, that's a very good way of doing things. What we favored as far as that Super ESCO is to have a third-party independent, which is not Sofiac, which is not the customer, which is not the ESCO, essentially someone which is neutral to actually implement the plan and confirm that the savings that were generated were actually there. So those savings are essentially independently measured, and everybody agrees contractually that those measurement will be the basis of the payment of the customer to the Super ESCO on a monthly basis, and on an annual basis, if there's a default, that the ESCO will repay the SOFIAC for it to be able to repay the investors. So a super ESCO like SOFIAC and like all others, it's an example among some, but they all come to the same goal, to eliminate the barriers in the market. Essentially, they work very often on long-term investment. In our case, it's 15 years. They work on non-resource subordinated debt. So that's the way we structure the investment. I won't go too long into this, but the way you structure the financing becomes an asset when you go to consumer, because there's a huge accounting issue related to how such contract is going to be treated. That will take another 2 hours to present, so I won't go too much into that. We made sure in our case that there's no impact on client borrowing capacity through this innovation within the financing. On the client side is positive cash flow from project start. So what we hear very often, it's too good to be true. We have a turnkey project where there's no risk related to the client itself. We eliminate the technical and financial risk because you only pay if there are savings, and you eliminate the performance project risk because it's all taken by the ESCO. So we remove the barriers, and additionally, because we remove all these barriers and there's more project to be implemented than there would have been otherwise, the ESCO wins because essentially all the ESCOs in the market will be fed with all these projects that will not happen otherwise. So in conclusion, so we leave enough time for some Q&A, and hopefully you'll have some. It's going to be my pleasure to answer those. Energy efficiency should be considered as the first fuel in order to meet market demand for energy for consumer. On a global level, on the client level, on a society level, we have to keep in our mind, we have to come to the conclusion that the first way to meet our energy needs has to be efficiency. We cannot always keep in mind that we call the utility, we buy oil, we buy natural gas. Energy is going to be there forever and it's going to be sustainable. It will not work. So we'll need renewable energy for sure. We'll need to decarbonize our economy. But at the end of the day, we cannot have the best renewable energy in the world and waste it tremendously at the consumer side. We will have to change mentality. So energy efficiency becomes a core value into any energy consumer, would it be at the residential level, at the commercial level, at the institutional level, in new designs and current installation. Energy efficiency has to be kept in mind as being the first fuel, the first option, the first place we think of. And that first fuel approach, if you want, is the one that is promoted today by the International Energy Agency, which is now focusing tremendously on energy efficiency as the solution that will bring added value in the short term, in the long term. Remember that as far as the environment, time is of essence, and the only way to deliver those benefits has to come with energy efficiency, including the renewable part and the demand side. This is where 50% will come from. ESCOs can be important actors to eliminate barriers to facilitate energy efficiency project implementation for consumers. ESCOs are not the only solution. There are other solutions. There are a lot of innovation in the market, and everybody plays a role. Consulting engineers, project implementers, manufacturers, government, everybody has to play a role, and their role is very important. ESCOs is an added value service approach that can trigger more projects, that can eliminate barriers, that can make decision makers to go forward with initiative that otherwise would not have been done. And they can play an important role, and we see that more and more around the world. I'll leave you with the final thing. I should have put it in the conclusion, but I did not, but I'll share you the link. I'm currently co-chairing, as Gary said, the Global ESCO Network, which is a UN initiative in collaboration with the Efficiency Value Organization. It's a movement. It's not even an organization per se, but it's a movement backed by United Nations to essentially promote the use of ESCOs worldwide. It's a free organization. Everybody can tap in. You just Google Global ESCO Network, you'll go on it. It provides essentially a few things. It provides free webinars like this one, where you can come in and hear about practitioners around the world. There was one about Morocco last week, and there was others from different countries who come and explain concepts and all that. So it's all free. There's about once a month. They have documentation. There's a library you can tap on, a lot of documentation related to this, books, contracts, references, example of models, projects, implementation. There's a lot of it in there. And there's an international symposium once a year. There's one. The first one was in Paris last year. The second one is in Istanbul in May. So you're all welcome if you want. There's a very, very small cost for registration. There's always more costs to go there. But otherwise, it's a very interesting platform to exchange, know more about ESCOs, meet with practitioners, meet with investors, meet with all type of organizations around the world. I know there's going to be some representative of Trinidad and Tobago this year will present. So you're all welcome. You'll find all the information on the Global ESCO Network website. And I would really welcome to see you there and exchange with you furthermore on that topic. On this, thank you very much for listening to me. I hope it was not too fast. I know the pace was good. I hope you've learned something, and happy to share answers about any questions you may have on the topic.
Thank you very much, Pierre. I think that was very insightful. I hope the participants have received some additional information or new information as it relates to ESCOs. It is not actually new to Jamaica. Actually, there was a project that was done years ago, I think maybe in the 90s or 80s, where PCJ building was actually an ESCO project that was implemented there by then a gentleman called Ethan Horton from Econoler engineer. He's retired now. And the then managing director, Dr. Raymond Wright, the late Dr. Raymond Wright, was the managing director of PCJ Group. It was his vision to do this ESCO, and they actually, because the savings were so good, they actually bought the project back from the investor. So they told the investor, we will buy all the equipment, we buy everything and take the savings, all the savings ourselves. So that was a shared savings project that was done. So I was actually given some documentation and insight to that particular project. Now, one of the things I want to ask the participants through your presentation is if they see the applicability of ESCOs in Jamaica and what they believe will be some of the things that we may need to do to kickstart it, because the opportunities from what we see is here. It's very, very clear. We always speak about the energy pyramid, the energy conservation first, energy efficiency second, and then renewable energy. I know renewable energy seems a lot sexier because it's more visible than energy efficiency, which is the first field, but intangibles can't be seen. So it'd be good to hear from the participants on their views of the ESCOs. I see some questions coming up. All right, one of the first questions coming from David Smith. It says, how do you see the ESCO model affecting or influencing the manufacturing industry and the economies worldwide, particularly in countries that produce raw materials, but historically have had to export raw materials to developed countries to then import the finished goods? You got that, Pierre?
I got it. Well, and thank you for the introduction as far as Jamaica. I'd realized one performance contracting scheme before, and it's not to say that there not has been more. Obviously, we don't know that they're not necessarily public. But to answer your question, the challenge, obviously, to introduce performance contracting in a country is to make sure that there is enough market at some point to live with such a concept. And it's more challenging in small countries than in bigger countries, obviously. The other thing is the creditworthiness of clients, which often is a problem because you see in any ESCO market type of activities, you need clients that are willing to pay and have the capacity to pay. And very often what you'll find in countries is clients who are very, very inefficient but not creditworthy at all, which is a limit of the ESCO concept because it's very difficult to work with a client that will benefit the most of those savings, but cannot actually pay for the savings over time because we cannot structure something with them. The last one is adapting the model. I think the worst thing we can think of is, well, I presented you the case of Canada, we cannot just copy paste. We cannot just copy paste everything and adapt it to one country. So the challenge is to adapt it to the culture. So we're currently working on a super ESCO scheme in Morocco. The culture is quite different. The legal frame is very different. The size of the super ESCO is 20 million euros and not 200 million at the beginning. It has to be adapted to the culture, the way they do things, and that's very important as well. So in a country like Jamaica, or in countries in general, like in the Caribbean, the size of the countries are smaller, but we can think of it as a regional market and just a one country market. The size of the consumer are obviously smaller as far as consumption. So the reference that I would have that no project of ESCOs should be smaller than 1 million will not apply over there. And you have to adapt the project as well there. The financing is very often has to be there, as you saw, either on the client side or at the ESCO side. The challenge is the financing available? And when I work in Jamaica on those concepts, I work on a UNDP project to create a super ESCO scheme in Jamaica many years ago. Well, like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, just before the pandemic. And financing has to be there. It's obviously more challenging when the banks do not have the same type of offer. In Canada, having a 10-year loan is very, very easy. Was not that easy at the time in Jamaica, and the conditions for these loans were not exactly the same either. So all of that has to be adapted. But the key is that, and I think that's the most important thing to leave all of you with, is it's the concept of performance contracting, not necessarily the models that I presented to you. Is it possible for any one of you, either as a client or either as a service provider, to use some of these concepts to not link the project just to, I do an audit, I construct, I sell an equipment, to actually link it a little bit to the benefits, reducing the risk of the client, because if you're willing to take some risk, even small, but still it's reassuring and you eliminate the barriers. There's certainly a huge potential in Jamaica and all the Caribbeans. The cost of energy is definitely in your favor, and believe me, in all countries in the world that I go to, I refer to Jamaica as the heaven for energy efficiency because of the cost of energy. You have one of the highest costs. Well, you don't see that as being heaven, obviously, because it costs you quite a lot of money. But every other country will say, well, we're not as efficient because the cost is not high enough. Well, in your case, that's not an excuse, obviously. So the potential is there as far as those infrastructure, the cost and everything. What I've seen in hotels and what I've seen in buildings that I've been to, potential for efficiency is definitely there, but there is a mentality to basically change like any other countries where the first fuel, we have to do something, it's beneficial, the risks are small, actors in the market has to play a role, and performance contracting, one way or the other, can potentially help you either as a buyer of energy, either as a service providers, equipment sellers, to essentially materialize these projects better. So I'm not sure, Gary, if it answered your question, or maybe I'm not exactly where you led me to, but let me know. I can complement.
Yes. I think you have. I think that is the direction the if I may say so, that the person who asked the question. I have two other questions for you, and they're back to back. So from Alex Bernard, it says, does the Global ESCO website referred to in your presentation or anywhere else, to your knowledge, have a database that lists tried and proven ESCOs that Jamaican entities could able to access or tap into? So let's go with that one first, and then I go to the second one.
Okay. If I understand the question well, you say, is there ESCOs that people can tap on within Jamaica to talk to actually see if it was possible to implement project? Is that your question?
Yeah, so they want to know if there's a database that they could access and for that purpose.
It's been too long I work in Jamaica to answer that question properly. And if I say I'm not aware of none, well, that's just limiting to my own knowledge. Funnily, in most countries, well, you have two types of ESCO. Let me say it like that. You have two types of ESCOs. You have the local one and you have the international ones. The local ones are local by definition. You have to live in the country to know them, and it's been such a long time that I work in Jamaica. I would not know. I know there's some companies regionally that were promoting the use of performance contracting that may work in Jamaica, and maybe they promoted themselves. So that I would not be aware of. But there are international ESCOs. So I mentioned three that I'm not tied with in any way, but three that are very international. Johnson Control, Honeywell, Siemens. They're three big companies that normally are pretty much involved in any country where their equipment are used. They sell motors, they sell control system, they sell variable speed drive, they sell a bunch of things. And these three companies, among others, because there's others that are the same thing, have included within their business model an EPC approach, an energy performance contracting approach. Very often they do not offer it in all the countries, but it doesn't mean that they could not offer it if they were asked to. So it's more about a matter of market than it is a matter of model. And I'll give you a similar case in Morocco. When we started the Super ESCO in Morocco, there was no ESCO. So what do we do? So we essentially we work with international firms, which are not the three ones that I mentioned. They're called Vinci and Veolia, that are French companies that are also involved quite a lot of places, maybe not as much in North America, but they're very involved in Europe and in North Africa. And we asked them, well, if you're doing it in France and Spain and in Portugal, would be willing to do in Morocco? And they actually said yes. So now we have ESCOs. Not that they have the local capacity locally, or they have, but they have not used it quite a lot because there was no market. But now we're creating a market. So that's a very long answer to your short question. I'm not aware of database.
Okay.
But again, it's only based on my own knowledge.
Okay. So I think the question as well was trying to figure out if that network would have actually posted a list of ESCOs that are globally placed, and if that list was there, then would it be something that they could access, or you'd have to be a part of the network to know who are the ESCOs that are seated across the world? So I think that is where the question was going.
Okay, so good question. The network is free to access, so there's no cost, there's no really membership, whatever. You just say I want to join in, and you join in. We work with ESCO associations. That's really the mandate of ESCO, the global ESCO network. Is everybody's invited, everybody can come in, everybody can join whatever activities and link with every document that we have. But we work with ESCO association, and that's where they develop these bases. So in North America, I'll give you a couple of places when you can look at if there's none in Jamaica. NISCO in the US, NISCO being NAESCO, is the National Association of ESCOs of the US. They will have 50 ESCOs, if not more, that are recognized based on the association. It's really a private sector association ESCOs. All these ESCOs potentially have a link with Jamaica because they're from North America. There's also an association of ESCOs in Mexico, which is also a neighboring country of yours, and they probably have a list of ESCOs that are working in Mexico, probably some of the same that are working in the US that can potentially be interested. We work with the Association of ESCOs in Chile, Colombia, Brazil. All of those exist, and they're within your hemisphere if you want. And there is equivalent of these associations in different countries. So there's one in France, EFS, FES, I think that's called. So through the Global ESCO network, you can access the list of the associations of ESCOs. And out of the associations, if you go on their website or directly ask the question, you may be put in contact with people who have lists. And I would be curious if you look at that list or those lists of associations, especially the ones in North America, if you would not recognize companies that are actually implemented and working in Jamaica, maybe not as ESCOs, but if Jamaica want to develop an ESCO association, even though there's not that many ESCO, but the Association of Engineers, whoever would say, well, we would like to have a little chapter or something we would welcome you as the representative of Jamaica into the global Esco network, and we can help you structure things. So you'll see in the website, there's a lot of support to how to create an association, what should be looking at to develop the Esco market in a country, the basic tools. So you'll see quite a lot of things. So again, long answer for short question, but maybe that's a way to look at to find the information you're looking at.
Thanks, Pierre. So I think this question is being directed in this direction. Interestingly, so the next two questions is kind of mothballing to what you have just articulating. So the first question is from Alex again. Additionally, it appears Canada has poised themselves at the forefront of these arrangements or product delivery methods, much like their efforts in streaming public-private partnerships. Would that be a fair position to adopt? And to add to that, another question, which is a lead-up question to that from Aston Stevens, is what type of marketing structure do you think we can use in Jamaica to promote the benefit of Esco? And what is used in other jurisdictions that we could customize? What do you think we can use here?
Yeah.
Over to you.
Yeah, it's a very good question again, or questions. In most countries that I've seen, maybe with one exception that I can think of, but most countries would have a successful Esco market started up with the public sector. Canada started with the private sector at the beginning, with Econoler being started up, but it's a different story. But on a national market, many countries, will be the case of the US, would be the case of Canada, would be the case of Europe. Essentially, the government elected to use EPC either on a guaranteed saving or shared saving scheme to launch tenders for the benefits of their own buildings. That created a market. As soon as there was the creation of a market, there was creation of a demand. Of an offer. So the offer was the Escos being created and the market coming in. So I'll give you one example. Dubai. When we started to work with the government of Dubai to create that initiative, Etihad Esco, there were no Escos operating per se. There was no performance contracting being used. We launched the first tender. 5 companies answered. They were from different places around the world. They had offices in Dubai, but they were not operating as an Esco. As of today, there's 20 Escos who are operating in the Emirates, because now they are 3 super Escos into their surrounding, working mainly with public sector. So there's the one of Dubai, there's the one from Abu Dhabi, so 2 different Emirates, and then the one of Saudi Arabia, which is neighboring country. So the best way to start it is to say to the government, well, you have all these assets, hospitals, schools, street lighting has been done mostly, and whatever else you have, airports, whatever you have the government owns, structure a program or launch individual tenders, request the market to provide you with proposals, either guaranteed or shared savings, and you create a market. That was the easiest way to start one, because you have access to all these buildings. The other way to do that is for the private sector to go by itself. And then you have to rely on the market capacity of these organizations. So it's easier because it does not rely on the government to go through the whole process of structuring something. It's a little more challenging because you have to win one client at a time. As the other one, you come with 10 hospitals at a time or 20 hospitals at a time, and then you're able to create a bigger market. So 2 ways to do that. The 2 can be done in parallel. But as the practitioners that are listening to us today probably want to act tomorrow and not in 5 years, probably going private sector and identifying the partners to develop such a PPP. Private sector partnership necessarily, but at least a partnership to start something, acquiring the technical capacity through existing Escos, working closely with Escos that have more capacity than the ones that the entities that you have in Jamaica, and linking yourself. The Johnson, Honeywell, Siemens, to give you the 3 examples, would definitely need to work with partners. And that would be one way to come to them and say, well, we have clients that would like to do something. Would you be interested to use your model that you use in the US, in Europe, in Canada, to the benefit of Jamaica? And then you, as a consulting engineer, as a manufacturer, as a service provider, whatever, you can link with them and develop a partnerships to actually go to market and bring these projects to life.
Thank you, Pierre. So I think you answered another question that was just posed, which was the best approach in terms of doing it locally or having a partner that has already established an Esco company to come in and work with Jamaica to work with a client? Is that an approach you have just mentioned, in a sense?
Exactly.
Okay, awesome. And so we are almost to the end. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, in terms of legislation and regulation, you are of the view, as you have worked in Jamaica, are you of the view that we don't need to have a particular regulation or legislation to support the development of Esco? You believe we could come in from the private sector side, given all the changes that we have had in your experience in Jamaica? Do you think we can come from the private sector side and do that partnership and introduce to a company? Or you think for us, we are going to need some policy directives which will give some changes to our legislation and regulation?
Difficult to say because I don't know the legislation and the regulation, so difficult to me to say. But my guess is when we go to most countries and we work on private sector, legislation is very often not in the way. So there's nothing that would prevent you to use that. On the other hand, what will need to be addressed is all the tax issues. And I again, this is problematic. I'll give you one example in 1 minute. When we got to China and we wanted to work with the Chinese on a shared saving concept because the Chinese are very entrepreneurs and they wanted to do that and eliminate all the barriers, the Ministry of Finance essentially said, well, okay, it's not a service agreement where you're paid as the service is done over time. It's essentially a mean to sell a product and be paid over time. So it means that he wanted to recognize the benefits of the projects they won. So you would have an income tax on the benefit of the project, even though your payment would be done over 10 years. And the ESCOs did not have the capacity to pay the income tax on something that have not been paid upfront. One problem. The other things is they sometimes on the tax issue, that's the case of Morocco, and the tax issue, they say, well, you have to pay the income tax, but we'll only reimburse you the income tax as you get paid, which obviously then creates the problem that not only you have to finance the service that you're providing and the equipment you're buying, but you have to finance the tax as well. So these little examples shows essentially that I don't think there's anything legal. And again, don't take my word for it, but based on experience, there's nothing in the legal and regulatory framework that would prevent performance contracting to work. But there might be issues on the tax issues and on everything on the fiscal side that may have to be very well addressed to make sure you don't go into a hole and actually say, well, there would be no problem, and then you face the problem when you have the first projects implemented.
Got you. So one of the key points I picked up, which I'm sharing with the participant, is capacity building is going to be critical for the transition into this ESCO model and into any energy transition. Capital is going to be critical, and how that capital is structured to do the implementation. The type of partnerships that will be forged to create a structure that will support both the client and the investor and the financial institution. And the fourth one I would say is public awareness. I think the knowledge of what an ESCO entails and what the project entails and how it would work the stories will need to be told so that people can understand the environment and how it would really work for the benefit of all parties involved. So that is my summary, my quick summary of what I believe the work behind it. I call it the work behind the meter for energy supply. So I don't know if there's any other questions. I'm going to thank you, Pierre, but I'm going to pass back on to the host. But thank you so much for your time. And I think there will be more interventions in relation to this particular area as Jamaica and the Caribbean grapples with energy costs. The biggest part of that cost is fuel, and fuel that we import at a very high cost with a volatile market. And it's going to take energy efficiency primarily more than renewable energy to manage that cost that is a recurring cost in our economy today. So thank you so much for your intervention. Over back to the host.
Okay, thank you very much, Gary. Thank you very much, Pierre, for that deep presentation. Very good, very exciting. I hope some opportunities can arise out of this. Thank you for the participants who also asked questions, which let's hope they have sown some seeds that will see some further growth. So at this point, nothing else for me to add except to call on council members from the organizing team here. I think it's going to be Kishana Bell who will have the final word, vote of thanks, and just to remind us of upcoming sessions. So, Kishana.
Hello, good morning. Thank you again for everybody that came out today. Thank you to our presenter. Thank you, Gary, for chairing the today's session. And just to remind you guys that next Thursday we meet back here and we'll be focusing on the Building Act and the emerging sewage treatment technology. So come back again next week, as well as once you leave this session, you will be a prompt to fill out a short survey after this session. So yeah, have a good day, everyone, and see you next week.
Okay, bye everyone. Thank you.